Welcome back to Reynolds Runabouts, everybody. I'm Jeffrey Reynolds. Today's episode is dealing with the transom of the mystery boat. I've removed the Atwood 1960 era tow eyes, which were slightly altered. They used to have a more decorative end on them, and they were taken off, cut and sanded, I bet. So I took those out. There were a few of the original cover. There's pins that they used to put in that your tarp could fit on, and then it would be tight. Took those out and just trying to discover, number one, what's the transom like? The color probably was natural or black for the first paint, and then there was a white put on, and then this teal or aqua. The white might have been a primer, because they would have used a light primer for a light color. The owner at this point doesn't know what he wants for this, so I'm just going to take it down, number one, just to figure out, get the paint off it, but also figure out how bad the transom veneer is. There's an area down here, you can't see that, down on the bottom that was fiberglassed. And I don't know if that sped up the deterioration, but it certainly didn't help. It trapped the water. And this is an area that's always a little bit vulnerable because that's where all the water is. If the boat is on end and the drain plug gets pulled or full of something, this is where it collects, and more than likely that's what happened. This also is an area that gets a lot of water action. It's got the propeller on it. It's got, when you stop, the water hits it. It's always getting wet. So transoms are almost always need some help. So I'm going to take the paint off, and then I'm going to take here's the old Speedo Pitot tube. I'll take that off, and then I'll just try to figure out how bad this fiberglass is. I don't think it goes to the bottom, but I haven't flipped the boat over either, so I don't know. I'm gonna have to look at that. So I'm gonna get all this off first, and then I'm gonna make a decision about whether we need to just make a patch here with a new piece of veneer, maybe come across, and then have a line there, which would look more natural. We'll figure that out when it happens. I finished 80 grit orbital sanding the transom to get off the 3 layers of paint. And then I got down into an area that I knew had been fiberglassed. This was pretty normal back in the day to do a fiberglass job on the bottom of the boat up to the water line. So I'm assuming that's where the water line is. On the wage maker I have next door here, that is where the water line was struck by the builder, the company. So I'm assuming this is what a restorer or the builder was doing. Turns out the only thing holding this fiberglass on was the Pitot or the Speedo pickup tube. And as you can see, I sanded it down just to see if there was a good seal, and there appears to be a good seal. Transition from wood to glass, but the glass may look good on the outside, but you shouldn't be able to rip it off like this. So what I'll do is just take it all the way off. There's your 1960-ish fiberglass, either a repair later on or how the builder did it. I'm not sure. So what I'll do is I'll finish cleaning this up. I'm getting closer and closer to saying that we could probably take this down with an oscillator. I have to see how far it goes. If it's really deep and into the interior of the boat, I would have to probably put in, since this is an 1.5-inch transom, yeah, 1.5-inch transom is pretty normal. It's kind of where the yoke of the motor, that was a good hung on there nice. You still had a lot of turning space on your tighteners for your motors, and it was hardy. Almost all the boats I've worked on are at least 1.5 inch plywood transoms, usually 2 pieces of 3/4. So what'll happen is I'll go through, I'll try to figure out where the rot stops. And I think it's pretty isolated to this left corner on the port, and it goes up. So more than likely I'll just go in there surgically with my oscillating tool and just figure out where the rot stops. And if I see the interior of the boat, I could either make a new plywood patch, or I might put stock in the back, build it all the way up, and then put a veneer piece on here all the way across, and maybe simulate a you could simulate a plank, which some of this mahogany plywood was done with a look. There'll even be fake seams where they put in the veneer strip. It looks like a plank. We could do that, or if the water line is there and the owner wants to strike the water line there, which wouldn't be unusual, we could go in there with just regular plywood and maybe a lumber back here to build it out, and then it would be painted so we could fit it in really well. We'll figure that out. He figures out what he wants to do with the surface of this boat. The wage maker next door has a clear transom, so it's not unusual to have a clear transom like a Lyman. They do that, wage makers. So that would be the next step, is for me to get permission from the owner to surgically start taking away some of this rot and see where it stops, and then we can make a decision. Up here, it's pretty deep. I think it's at least 3 out of 5 or 6 layers deep into that first 3/4 inch or less. So yeah, there might be a Dutchman there. It all depends on how we can make it look nice. So back to work. What I'm going to do today is attack and get real intrusive with this transom to figure out how deep the rot is. I'm pretty sure it goes all the way into the frame, which is right there. So at least this is bad, and I'm going to work my way across the side to this side, just putting my knife in, trying to figure out where the good wood is and where the bad wood is, and then I'll stop there. And then when the owner and I make a decision about whether this transom is painted or is going to finish with stain and varnish, then I will have to make a decision on where to put a new piece of veneer, make a nice straight line, cut it, take it out, build it back up, and then I'll put the veneer in to match this, so it'll look really nice. This will be really close to the water line too, so not a lot of it will show, but we'll try to figure, if we do go natural, to make sure it looks good. So first thing I'm going to do is release these rear splash rails or spray rails, usually mostly for protection of the transom. They don't do a lot of spray prevention, they just get hit. So what I'm going to do is release, I'm going to cut the brass, I'm assuming silicon bronze brass, through screws, cut those off. I'll take the originals out when I get to the interior of the boat, and I'll use these patterns. They feel pretty soft, and but that's just fine. Look, mahogany. I have plenty of short pieces like this that'll work. So I'm going to get back to work removing both of these, and then I will start the veneer removal and just see really how bad this transom is. So I've got the rear spray rails off the transom, and like a boat I did in the previous episodes, there's rot underneath. It looks like there might have been a little bit of bedding compound, but certainly not enough to protect it probably not even any varnish under it, which would have really been good, because then the bedding compound would have stayed on top. It might have been absorbed, which is what it does if you don't seal it before you put the surfaces together. Um, so yeah, I just went ahead and looked at this one too, and the screw is so, there's a nice silicone bronze in there, but this is pretty rotten, as you can see. I'll just take that right out. Shows you how good the wood is. And then we have just the same thing here, just a slight bit of bedding compound left, and then some really nice silicone bronze screws. So good to a point, but should have been better. So what I'm going to do now is just start from that end and move my way across. Hopefully it won't be too bad. I'll stop. When it stops, I'll stop, because there's no sense going any farther if we're just going to do an epoxy fill, rebuild, and then paint. I won't worry about making this attractive with a nice line and then slipping the veneer back in. We'll get that figured out when the paint decision is made. So I'm going to get to work on this and see how bad it really is. Well, largely the news is good. I just decided to go down to one of the transom framing pieces, which is very solid. And I went ahead and just took a dust above it so I didn't get into it. And the plywood was largely rotten, especially here. This was terrible. And you can even see it in the frame, which is soft, which is really concerning as I go forward. I'm going to have to replace that piece too. It's almost like the boat was leaning to port on an angle with the transom down, which transom down is pretty normal. And then the drain plugs get full and the water collects and there's your rot. Happens in fiberglass boats all the time, and wood. And this one looks like it might have been just tipped to port. And a lot of it ended up there, because this is nice. This is nice. In fact, where the glue was still pretty good, but the plywood transom cover was on the starboard side and largely above this bow, or the bottom frame. And that tells me that it was probably tipped. This is coming out very hard, so this was very good. But like I said, to make my line, I'm going to make a straight line, and then I will take that off, and then I'll just put a brand new piece in of plywood at this depth. And there'll be a line here, which will look like a plank, like you see on a plank boat. And it'll look pretty good, regardless if we do a transom that's stained and varnished or painted. So I'll get at this with a orbital and some 40 grit to get that plywood and its glue all the way off. And then once I get back over to the port corner, this is all gone. So there's a kind of a corner piece that was built out of maybe two pieces. Once I sand it, I'll be able to see it. I'll have to replace these with solid mahogany, which shouldn't be too bad. This is surprisingly solid, and it might be because of the thickness, which saved it. I'll take that down. It's already very close to being where a piece of plywood would not, well, it would be within this plank, which means it's overlapping, which means it's too shallow. So might have to build this up with something to bring out that plywood. But for the moment, it looks like everything is really good except this side corner, which I expected this to be gone, and I'm still not real sure what's going to happen there. I might end up just scarfing, like maybe come over here. This is not too bad. and just scarf a new one in, and then go ahead and add that second piece, or three, whatever it turns out to be. Then we'll put the skin or the plywood back on, and then attack this outside corner where the planks or the ends are gone at least, and then the rest of it I will go ahead and just have to scarf in a new plank, it looks like. But I've got a lot of cleaning up to do before I do that, and I want to get this all ready to go for the new piece. So back to work. I've decided that I'm going to run my um, circular saw on a straight line that I just struck, that I'm happy with. It's below the engine well drain plugs, so that that'll be, within the new piece of plywood. I'll just um, drill them from the back out, and then I drop down an inch and a half, which is the difference between the far edge of the circular saw and the blade. And I put in a batten where screws are going to appear on the transom anyways in this existing piece, not only to secure it, but it'll look like it's a two plank transom that way. And so the holes will be covered because they'll be countersunk and have their own silicon bronze. So what I'm going to do is run my circular saw across this, and it's just inside the depth of the plywood, so that it'll just cut a little bit into this frame, which is it's plywood that was built up to form the top of the transom as a huge solid frame. And then that obviously will get filler in it when I put this back on, so it'll fill in and it'll allow me to have a beautiful edge. And then I'll clean that up, because I'm sure this is going to be a mess taken off with my oscillating saw. And then I'll get that all cleaned up and prepped, and then I will fit and cut a new piece of plywood. I think that's 5/8, and I'll get that dropped in there, and we'll have that ready to go. And then when I come back after I fix this frame corner, I'll have that all ready to go, and get ready to put this transom to bed. So that completes the removal of the plywood that was both rotten and fine here. Obviously, it was a lot harder to get this off. But the oscillating tool, I like to call my power chisel, does a pretty good job. What I'll do now is I'll go ahead and use the metal cutting tip for that and cut through these soft brass drain plugs that are coming out of the engine well. And then when I put the new piece of plywood on, I'll re-drill those holes, and then put brand new drain plugs in there, so we can, or drains, or not even plugs, or drains, and they'll be fine. Then the next episode, I will show you how I tackled the rotten port corner frames. It looks pretty good, but I see holes and things, and I'm really not sure. I'm going to get in there and sand all this and ferret, and then I'll know. But I'm pretty sure this corner is gone, which is a piece of stock. it looks like maybe like a 2x4 piece of mahogany, which I'll stick in there, and then 2x4 corners right here. And then this, I'm not sure yet, but if it is shot, I will go ahead and just probably come back to about, well, whatever I can find solid wood, which is right about here, and I'll cut this out and I'll scarf in a new piece to take that place of that, and it'll have a very long scarf that's at least a 12-inch scarf, so it'll it'll start way back here and then it'll gradually get thicker as I get to the edge where it belongs, and this will all be epoxied, so the joint of that new scarf will be perfect. And then I'll put in thickened epoxy to fair this area where there was rot, or areas where maybe I got a little too deep with this blade. Even though I was trying, sometimes it just goes down too deep. But once I get it sanded, I'll know exactly how much. And I'll go ahead and I'll fair that so that when I put the plywood on, it's really a nice flat surface. And then I'll just epoxy all that right back in, including that new frame. So that'll be the end of this episode. Thank you for tuning in. If you are enjoying this video series on the 16-foot 1960 mystery boat, please hit the like button. It's always nice to receive positive feedback, and I can see what you guys are enjoying. And if you're not a subscriber, please consider doing that as well. You'll get notices every 2 weeks when the video is available to watch, and it is always, again, another positive feedback. So until we meet again, thank you.